Black Myth Wukong has officially passed 10 million units sold across all platforms. 3 million concurrent players across all platforms as well, which is crazy. Peaking at 3 million concurrent players globally. 10 million units sold. It's crazy. That is so much. That is so much. Again, like Hogwarts Legacy was the biggest game of 2023 with one of the biggest IP in the world. And over a year, it sold 23 million copies. This game, in like, what, a few days, has sold 10 million. That's outrageous. That's crazy. So no matter which way you look at it, it's a tremendous success. This was earlier this morning, but if I refresh it now, it's down. Because most of the player base seems to be tied up in, maybe not most, but a lot of the player base seems to be tied up in China. And so the peaks tend to be in the late evening in China. That seems to be when the most players are jumping in. We'll see if this peaks again over the weekend, if a lot more players are jumping in, but it does seem to be very, very heavily geared towards Eastern markets. I don't know exactly, you know, it seems like most of the peaks tend to start dying off around like, well, I mean, middle of, like players are playing a lot in the morning in the US, which is not what you would typically expect. You expect the peaks to be more in the evenings. So it seems like the player base is not necessarily US centric, but it's totally fine. Players are players, gamers are gamers. All-time peak at 2.4 million yesterday. So it's breaking records even still. And this weekend, it very well might break another record. Even still, though, there's companies that are still trying to get the game basically canceled. Nintendo Enthusiast, which is apparently an institution or a company that is covering this, they posted an article saying, "We all share a common hobby, and we should stand together to make sure as many people can enjoy this as possible." And then the title of it is Black Myth Wukong's shameless lack of diversity is attracting the wrong type of fans. And then as they say, bro, they're still trying. Again, this is a game in which you play as a monkey beating up lions, bears, and dragons. You even transform in the game into like a cicada and fly about. It's quite varied, dare I say, diverse, but it doesn't fit into the type of diversity they're looking for. What's even more crazy is that they say we should stand together to make sure as many people can enjoy it as possible, implying that because there are not more, I'm assuming what they're asking for is more representation of, say, like women, people of color, trans characters, things like that, because there's not enough of that, minorities, whatever. Therefore, not as many people can enjoy it. And I think that that is such like a ridiculous thing to say, that somebody's not going to play a game, again, where you play as a monkey, beating up bears and tigers and dragons. Somebody's not going to play it because there isn't somebody that looks exactly like them in the game. Like, there are not white dudes from Colorado in this game, and I'm having a great time. Like, very, very few people are gonna be like buying games purely for that reason. It's just, and I think it's pretty clear when you design games solely around that, it doesn't actually follow through with much success. But even still, there's still people sitting on the sidelines hoping to get their hands on it. There are people that are not able to play this for various reasons, such as Xbox gamers specifically. And there is actually an update on Xbox's port with this. So as you can see, the game was originally scheduled to release on the consoles alongside the PC and PlayStation before it was revealed in June to not be coming to Xbox at the same time. Then later that month, Xbox issued a statement on the game's delay on the console saying they were, quote, excited for the launch of Black Myth Wukong on Xbox and Series X and S, and we're working with Game Science to bring the game to our platforms. And now that the game is out, there's a bit of an update. According to Forbes' Paul Tassi, Black Myth Wukong not being on Xbox isn't a case of Sony snatching up any sort of console exclusive agreement with the developer. Instead, it's Microsoft's own consoles and their policies causing the hiccups. Quote, the bad news is that once again, Xbox seems to have blundered into a Baldur's Gate 3 situation, which, if you don't recall, basically Baldur's Gate 3 didn't launch on Xbox at the same time as PlayStation because they could not get the split screen functionality working on the Series S, and so they needed an override to gain the ability to basically launch it. Like, they basically needed to be able to turn that feature off. But the policy at Xbox was any game that goes to the Series X has to be identical on the Series S. You can change the resolution, scaling, the graphic settings, whatever, but it has to be the same game. The content has to be the same. And they had to get an override from Microsoft to allow them to publish it on the Series S without that feature, which is why they had to delay it. Tassie follows up, says that the reason the game didn't make it on Xbox, again, everybody kind of knew this already, is because of a tech issue. While the specific issue isn't mentioned in the report, it does seem to imply that the game isn't running on Series S as well as it should be, and Microsoft's policy since the console's launch of games coming to both X and S seems to have backfired once again. Again, the policy is that people who bought an S will get the same games as on the X, and so there's no way to launch your game just on the Series X. It has to go on both. Insider Gaming has reached out to Microsoft on this claim, but a rep simply passed along the same statement from June that was also sent to Tassie, just copy and pasted once again. We're excited for the launch of Black Myth Wukong, blah, 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 and we're working with them. We can't comment on deals made by our partners with other platform holders. Again, there was no deal made. They just simply couldn't get it running on the Series S, so this isn't relevant. But we remain focused on making Xbox the best platform for gamers, and great games are at the center of that. Whatever. There's still no word on when to expect it. There's still no word on anything like that. But it's, again, another example of Microsoft missing out on one of the biggest games of the year simply because they're holding back their platform with a console that can't keep up. And again, there's people that get very, very upset when you bring up the Series S, like being weak. And I just don't know how else to put it than like, at this point, it is not up for debate. The Series S is the weakest console on the market right now for these cross-platform titles. And it can't keep up with the other consoles that are still struggling. Like the PlayStation is still struggling in comparison to PC, certainly. It's, I mean, as is outlined here by Digital Foundry, even on PlayStation 5, it's having troubles. So on the Series S, I can only imagine. This is their comment on the Series, or on the PlayStation 5.
The performance mode uses frame generation. And there are tons of signs of it that you can see all over the place, like at the corner of the frame with motion blur on, there's visible artifacting. Little particles have lots of artifacting in them. And if you go frame by frame or even just watch it in real time, frankly, you will see a lot of artifacts during fast motion where clearly there's a real frame and an interpolated frame and a real frame and an interpolated frame. It is kind of an abuse of this technology because they're trying to use it to hit 60 FPS. The base frame rate is only 30 FPS, and this is a really fast-paced game. A lot of action, a lot of violence to it, a lot of movement, and it just does not love this technique. It does not love it.
Yeah, 30 to 60 FPS frame interpolation or generation is always, it's very situation dependent, whether or not it can be useful, and it requires high quality. FSR 3 frame generation, as we know, is a little bit lower quality than DLSS 3, where it's already a stretch to get that 30 to 60 to look good. And then you combine it with the serious amount of transparencies, fast motion, and the sharpening, and then the motion blur, which has its artifacts of its own, and then the 1080p base resolution here, what it appears to be. It's really pushing the technology well beyond the breaking point of what I think is acceptable.
And I'm inclined to kind of agree. I think if you look at the PS5 performance mode, it's real rough. Like, I understand some people are able to turn their brain off to it, but I just personally can't. Like the PS5, it's this stuff I can't do. Like, you see the weird, like, it's almost like, you know, whatever is it cross hashing, cross sketching? I forget what the name of it is, but there's like this weird checkerboarding all throughout whenever there's a frame generated. And it's super, super distracting. It destroys all detail in the frame. And it drives me crazy. Like, I just can't do it. I can't do it. I would rather play Black Myth at 30 frames at a higher resolution without this than get to technically 60 frames or close to it, but it looks like absolute garbage. So that's just my personal preference. I know some people can turn their brains off to it. Joel Raptor was saying he thinks the game looks really good and runs really well on performance mode. I don't know if he was being totally sarcastic or not, but to me, it's too rough to play on performance mode, just personally. I can't do it. I can't do it. Unless you're used to a beefy PC, the PS5 version is just fine. You notice some of that stuff, but it seems minor. Well, I think it also depends on the display you're using. Again, on a smaller display, really doesn't look that bad. On a big TV or even just on a monitor you're sitting close to, it's very, very noticeable. And I do totally agree that after you try the game on PC and then you go to PS5, it's way more noticeable. But I criticize Star Wars Jedi Survivor for having similar problems and relying too much on upscaling to hit frame rate targets. And in this case, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Hazardous Roman, also thank you for resubbing with Prime 3 months. Ooh, baby. Thank you for that. Somaya, thank you for the super chat. I am at the later half of Wukong, and I think the game is a 7 out of 10 with some beautifully animated sequences, but levels get hollow after a while, which is most of the game. I'm unsure now whether it will win Game of the Year. Yeah, I'm not sure if it'll win. I think it'll probably gets nominated at the very least, but I think you're right. I mean, you guys remember when we were talking about Black Myth Wukong months ago, what I kept asking for was, what is the connective tissue? The boss fights that they keep showing look awesome, but what's the connective tissue between boss fights? What do you do from one boss fight to the next? Is it just you go through a door and you load into a new boss fight? Cool. I'm down with that. The boss fights look awesome. Okay, it's just one after another. But now we know that no, there's levels to explore. There's little things hidden around corners, and there's little hidden bosses and encounters and stuff. But that connective tissue is where the game is weakest. And I think that that's pretty clear that there's a reason they weren't showing a lot of that in preview events, because it was the weakest part. But the boss fights are really the boss fights are really good. And so that's just where we are. He took my thing.